telling Republican members not to hold town halls anymore, given what we all know is the power that our voices have.
Their proposals are unpopular, and they know it. And I mean, think about that. What kind of instructions are those? Don't show up and talk to the people.
Don't allow yourself to be accountable to your bosses.
Hide from the folks, right?
Yeah.
How about you show up and do your job instead of sending people to a list, telling them to list 5 things they've done this week?
About 2 weeks ago, Tyler Cohen was on Capitol Hill, and I did a video about his conversation with AOC and another video on his conversation with Jasmine Crockett. You can see all of these on his channel, Tyler Cohen, here on YouTube. This one, he talks to Raphael Warnock, Senator Warnock, and I think it's interesting to share, so I'm just getting around to it now. Let's watch it together. I'll have some thoughts, and then I want to know what you think in the comments.
I'm joined now by Senator Raphael Warnock. Thanks so much for joining me.
Great to be here with you. Thank you.
So I wanted to turn your attention to a clip of Alina Habba speaking out recently.
Starting to think about maybe some of those veterans who worked for the federal government and maybe what the administration can do to at least help salvage their lives.
Well, as you know, we care about veterans tremendously. I mean, that's something the president has always cared about. Anybody in blue, anybody that serves this country. But at the same time, we have taxpayer dollars. We have a fiscal responsibility to use taxpayer dollars to pay people that actually work. That doesn't mean that we forget our veterans by any means. We are going to care for them in the right way, but perhaps they're not fit to have a job at this moment or not willing to come to work.
So that was Alina Habba obviously saying that veterans aren't fit to have a job at this moment. Can I have your reaction to that?
There are no words to even respond to that. It's outrageous. I come from a military state. Georgians all across my state are not only veterans, but touched by the work of veterans. Listen, our veterans are the best among us, and they deserve a president and an administration that understands that.
More and more, we're seeing not just veterans losing their jobs, but this administration really predicating its focus on taking things away from the American people.
Right.
We've already seen them set their sights on Medicaid, on food stamps by virtue of their budget resolution seeking to strip $880 billion from energy and commerce, $230 billion from the Agriculture Committee. They've been focused on stripping away through DOGE, education funding, healthcare funding, cancer research. And so in the lead up to the election, there was a lot of focus on bringing prices down, making sure that Americans had more. And yet now that we're actually in this administration, there is so much being taken away. So can I have your response to the fact that really what we've seen thus far is little more than a bait and switch from this administration?
The Trump administration has declared war on the American people, on ordinary people. And it looks like no one is safe except the billionaires who were on the stage with him during his inauguration. An assault on veterans, on federal workers, on our public health care infrastructure, on the ability of kids to get through K through 12th grade, the work that's done by the Department of Education, the CFPB, which provides protection to consumers, all of the things that we're counting on to protect us and have people have a path to prosperity. They're taking all of those things away. I think it's important to acknowledge that, but also it's important to acknowledge why they're doing it, because that's just as important. Why are they doing it? To pass a tax cut for the wealthiest people in America. I mean, the wealthiest of the wealthy are the ones who will benefit by and large from this tax cut. And oh, by the way, they're putting a $4 trillion hole in the deficit even as they do it. Explain to me how that is fiscally conservative. Explain to me how that is good for America.
Well, you know, their retort for that is going to be that all they're doing is eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse, that any money they take away from Medicaid is just going to be fraudulent.
They should start, if they're interested in waste, fraud, and abuse, they should start with Elon Musk, co-president Musk's own companies, and ask why has he gotten $20 billion and more from the federal government. This is welfare at its worst, and this is not about efficiency. This is about dwindling the government down to nothing so that they can then reassert a vision of America that is a far cry from anything we've ever seen. Do things need to be fixed? Yes. Are there opportunities always to address waste and abuse? Absolutely. Am I concerned about fraud? Am I concerned about people being abused? Absolutely, which is why we need the CFPB, which, by the way, has returned some $21 billion back to the American people, not to the United States Treasury, but to the people.
I want to talk about what you're going to be doing this weekend. So it's the 60th anniversary of Bloody Sunday. You'll be in Selma. Can you talk about why you're going there?
On Sunday, I will return to holy ground. As pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church, I was also John Lewis's pastor. And he continues to inspire me. 60 years ago, ordinary people, marginalized people, a multiracial coalition of conscience approached that Edmund Pettus Bridge, and they brought us a little bit closer towards our ideals. And I think it's important for us to mark that moment historically. I intend to be there preaching on Sunday. But I think it's also important to put this in a larger historical context, because I think it bears relevance to the moment we're in right now.
Yeah.
Andy Young, Ambassador Young, who is still lives in Atlanta, is in his 90s, and those of us who live in Atlanta, we have the benefit of walking among giants all the time, and from the civil rights movement. And I like the story that Andy Young tells me. He talks about how he was with Dr. King when Dr. King went to the White House and made the argument to President Johnson that we need a voting rights law. And President Johnson said, you know, you're right, I understand, but I can't get a voting rights bill through the Congress right now. I just passed the Civil Rights Bill of 1964, and that was a heavy lift. There's no way that I'm going to be able to do that. I just, in various ways, he kept saying, I just don't have the power right now to do it. And Martin Luther King Jr., as they left and got in the car, he turned to Andy Young and his other lieutenants and said, well, the president says he doesn't have the power. I guess we're going to have to go and get the president some power. I love that story because it is the recognition that it's really ordinary people fighting for American values who set the context for the change that we need in the world. And that's what the Selma March was about. It was about Martin Luther King Jr. and those who marched alongside him going to Selma and creating the context and the conditions to do what was necessary. And literally within a few months, they passed the Voting Rights Law of 1965.
I don't want to break up his stride here, but I think that it's absolutely true. Setting aside race for just a moment, I think we're currently kind of hoping the courts will save us from this. The courts don't have any power to save us. They can hand down rulings, and as we see, Trump and his administration are simply ignoring them. They work for us, and there's 350 million of us. So we have to stand up and stop taking it. We have to take to the streets. And we have to, we're the power. And I don't like that. That's exhausting and inconvenient and scary, frankly. It's not what I want to be doing with my time. But if we want to keep our country, that's what we're going to have to do. And I'm not advocating for violence, but we have to make our voice heard. That's the only way this is going to change.
And which changed the whole American electoral landscape, without which I would not even be sitting here talking to you right now.
To that point then, what is your message to folks who are agitating across the country right now, showing up at these town halls, showing up to confront their Republican elected officials, even as we've just had recent news from within the NRCC telling Republican members not to hold town halls anymore, given what we all know is the power that our voices have?
Their proposals are unpopular and they know it. And I mean, think about that. What kind of instructions are those? Don't show up and talk to the people.
Don't allow yourself to be accountable to your bosses.
Hide from the folks, right?
Yeah.
How about you show up and do your job instead of sending people to a list, telling them to list 5 things they've done this week? How about you show up and do your actual job? I love the story of Selma again because these are just ordinary folks, and they didn't have any reason to think that they could win. And I think that is so important right now because we're up against so much. I think it's easy to shrink, to give in to cynicism. And I think that's what folks want us to do. But John Lewis, Amelia Boynton, a woman who was gassed on that bridge, we don't say her name enough, Amelia Boynton, they didn't have any reason to believe that they could win. Hosea Williams, who marched alongside John Lewis across that bridge, brute force with the whole authority of the state behind those state troopers on the other side of the bridge, and they kept on marching. And John Lewis didn't have any reason to think that he would win. I presided over his funeral a few years ago, and I asked myself, as I was preparing the night before for his funeral, what was John Lewis thinking when he was crossing that bridge with nothing but a backpack on and a long trench coat? Was he thinking that at the end of his life, 3 American presidents would attend his funeral from both sides of the aisle? Was he thinking that one day he'd be the recipient of a Presidential Medal of Freedom? He couldn't have imagined any of that. I think he was just trying to stay alive that day so that he could fight the next day. And by some twist of human resilience coupled with grace, he crossed that bridge and built a bridge to the future. It is our job to show up in this moment. We never know when that moment will come where change happens. But every single day we have to make the case. We have to stand up for the struggles of ordinary people, stand up for health care as a human right, stand up for women to have a voice and to have autonomy over their own body, stand up for children and young people so that they have a path towards prosperity, so that their parents' income doesn't determine their outcome. These are the things that we have to center every single day, and no, we don't give in to the autocrats. We believe in democracy.
Senator, we're in a moment right now where obviously things are going in the wrong direction. We're seeing rights get stripped away. We're seeing folks lose lifelines that they need to be able to survive. And so in a moment like this, as you prepare to go back to Selma, how do you get people to keep the faith as things are going in the wrong direction?
I'm not going to sugarcoat it. These are tough times. Dr. King used to say it's only when it's dark that you can see the stars. And we don't know when you have this moment where you can see this kind of change that happens. And I think that the work of the activists, the work of those of us who care about ordinary people is to keep showing up, doing it day after day after day. And sometimes, quite honestly, you have to take the long view. If you look at the whole history of our country, there are moments when the democracy expands and there are moments when it contracts. And we're in a moment of contraction. But our work, our moral work, our holy work, in my view, is in this moment of contractions to stand up, to show up, to be faithful. And it's often in those moments that you give birth to something that's even larger and bigger and better. We got to keep pushing our country towards its ideals.
Yeah, Raphael Warnock is a good speaker. He's got a calm cadence, but I think he's right in the resonance with the march at Selma is that this is going to take America refusing to accept it. And personally, other than coming on here and vocalizing these opinions, I'm still working up the energy to get off my ass and get out there because it's going to snowball. But it's got to happen, and we can't wait. Let me know what you think in the comments.